I'm Mark Despotakis. We're here in the Pennsylvania State Capitol in Harrisburg for the Pennsylvania Music Educators Association annual Music Education Advocacy today. So all throughout the day here in Harrisburg, students have been performing, and we've had music educators and students here visiting various legislative offices to let them know about the importance of music education. But also specifically this year, we've been talking about the need for more funding for education, as well as the new federal Every Student Succeeds Act and how music fits into that. As part of our day today, we visited with the chairs of the Senate and House Education Committees. Take a look at some of our interviews. So, music and arts programs in Pennsylvania. What's your take on the role of music and arts in Pennsylvania schools?
I think music and art is critically important as part of education. Not only because my wife was a music teacher, but because certainly when I was in school, I enjoyed certainly the art part of that. And I think it's a way to keep students interested and develop their potential expertise in areas that we might otherwise miss.
So we're in this kind of sea change time of education. The ESSA, the Every Student Succeeds Act, is now going to affect. PDE is working on a plan. There's these words, well-rounded education now in there, and we're so happy that music is one of in there. What's your take on how Pennsylvania is going to implement this, and maybe where music and the arts fit into our implementation?
Well, I think music and arts have always been part of education. We've just not given it the priority it deserves. And certainly it's one of the things that's optional in my school district. You can have art or you can have music, but you then have to give away something else in order to get that. So it's not as if it's seen as a core element that's part of education, which I think it should be. And I would hope that as we go forward, as we do in fact look at broadening education, educational opportunity, we'll make certain that we include both music and art as part of that.
So you were just in this hearing with the folks from PDE about ESSA. What's kind of your take about where the state's going with ESSA implementation?
Well, I think we're trying to implement the new law, but again, I think it goes back to knowing what works and what doesn't work. We certainly have all the criticism about No Child Left Behind. I'm not certain that in doing ESSA, we've actually looked at those points and said that we're going to make it better in this new law, or we prioritize the things that should have been prioritized in No Child Left Behind in ESSA. So I think that's the key here is what do you do to educate a young person so they understand their potential, they develop an interest that they're willing to pursue that gives them a productive life. And I don't know that we do that a lot. And there are also ways I think we could change not only the requirements, but also the structure and the way we drive out education to kids, and that would help as well.
Okay, so we'll look forward to see what PDE comes up with here in their plan, and we continue.
Good question.
Yeah.
And I think we're going to be influenced greatly by the new direction in the from the federal level, and I'm not certain where that is at this point.
Right. I don't think they are either. But so let's talk about education funding. The governor's proposed $100 million. Who knows what's going to happen at the federal level? We know Pennsylvania schools are kind of hurting. What's your take on where we are education funding-wise?
I'm glad the governor put that proposal in, but I think that the reality is we need more money. And I said to everyone that when they come to me and they advocate for whether it's education or any other issue, the reality is we have a limited budget. There is no desire whatsoever to raise taxes. Therefore, we're going to have to deal with what we already have and try and make it work. And so we kick the can down the road a little bit further, but I see no way in the world in this legislature there's going to be any consideration for increasing any level of taxation, even if it is to preserve a viable public school system.
So what do?
We make it like we're doing a reasonable budget that makes sense. And we hope that as we go down the road further, we'll find a better opportunity to do it better.
Okay. Let's just start with, what's your take on music and arts programs and how they impact students in Pennsylvania?
They impact them very positively. It's not only in terms of being able to perform and have that opportunity. If you want to learn about collaboration, which is one of the key ingredients in this new economy, is best way to learn is to be in a band or an orchestra because everyone has to work together to get the final product. And You know what's happening now with the type of testing that we're doing is we're focusing on algebra, biology, and language skills, and not the arts. But in this new economy, the way you make money, the way you add value is through identifying and solving problems. And the key to that is to have creativity. And it's through the arts that we learn the creativity. So we're really depriving so many young people in this Commonwealth when we focus on certain subjects and forget the arts.
So one of the ways now that we're able to kind of change the educational landscape is ESSA, the Every Student Succeeds Act.
Correct.
So even just today you were in a hearing about this. Pennsylvania is working on their state plan. What's your take on where the state plan is, how arts fits into that?
Well, I wish I could tell you that that arts fits in a positive way. They still seem to be focusing in on 3 subject matters. They still want to continue to use the Keystone exams, maybe in a different length of time. But it seems to me that you have to understand this in another way. The micro way, the same question, or I should say the macro way, the same question that we face in Pennsylvania, every industrialized and advanced nation faces. How do you produce a workforce that can add value? And the key to adding value is not only knowledge, but the creativity in using that knowledge. And when we see countries such as China, and I've visited it and taught there, and I just was recently there in May, they are rejecting the very system of testing that we're trying to put together. They reject it because they said that they have created technocrats, people who know the knowledge of science or engineering very well, but lack 2 abilities: the ability to work in collaboration and the ability to use creativity. Those 2 abilities, which are so essential to this new economy, is precisely what's taught through the arts.
Absolutely. All comes down to money, obviously. So here we are, state budget season again. The governor has proposed a $100 million increase. I'm curious for your thoughts on that. But also, you've talked a lot about the money we're spending on testing. And how maybe that could help in to the regular education pot. So if you could speak to those 2 issues.
Oh, absolutely. You know, the total testing cost over the last 8 years in Pennsylvania is between $1.2 and $1.3 billion. I mean, that's an obscene amount to spend on testing. We should put the money in the classroom. We should put the money with the teachers so we can focus on education, not simply testing for the purposes of testing. And especially in many of our poorer schools, we test and then we stamp failure on the student, the teacher, the school. But we know that the only correlation between the keystones is with poverty. And do we need to spend $1.1 billion to figure that out? Rather, we should be spending the money to assist those students who are in poverty. And the arts have always been a tremendous positive force in many of our poorest school districts in this Commonwealth. So let's stop spending the money on obsessive and consistent and continuous testing and focus in on education, be student-centric, understanding that every student is different, that one testing system for all doesn't work, and understanding that music and art and theater are ways in which a student can blossom and ways in which a student can then go on to other areas of learning as well. I always remember one of my professors when I was in college teaching me that really, if you study poetry, there's a rhyme, there's a beat. And so music and poetry come together, and we have to understand that. Or another teacher said that every culture has a certain beat to it, a rhythm to it, and she would demonstrate the different cultures. So what I'm trying to say is that we've only begun to really tap the potential of the arts in terms of learning. Arthur Miller used to say that what art does is it makes a society confront the questions it doesn't want to confront. Well, isn't that the purpose of education? And so I really believe we have to preserve the arts in our schools, and we have to be supportive.
take on the budget here, this additional $100 million the governor has proposed?
Well, that's very little money, you have to understand. Many of my school districts, I represent Chester County, which essentially is an affluent area, are getting into five figures, not even the six figures as an increase. And I don't think it's going to do much more than assist some of the schools in terms of inflation, and understand that at the very time that we've increased this $100 million, we also have cut transportation subsidies by 50%. So for most districts, the money they get will be eaten up immediately in extra costs of transportation.
We should also note that as part of our interviews today, we tried to get interviews with Representative David Hickernell and Senator John Eichelberger, both Republican chairs of the House and Senate Education Committees. Both declined our request for an interview. If we do get answers to their questions in writing, of course, we will post that information on PMEA's website. We also invite you to visit PMEA's website, pmea.net. Click on the Advocacy tab to find out all of the information we do advocacy-wise throughout the year, and to see more information on what happened here today in Harrisburg. So for now, from Harrisburg at the state capitol, I'm Mark Despotakis for PMEA.